Hi, it's Gary Kayye. We're here at InfoComm 2017, and obviously we're in the SDVoE booth. I'm here with Justin Kennington, who is the president of the SDVoE Alliance. First of all, Justin, exactly what is the Alliance?
What we are is the Software-Defined Video over Ethernet Alliance. This is an ecosystem of companies in and around the AV over IP space working together to create the platform for the next generation of AV applications.
Yeah, basically, to dissect what he just said, as we all know, over some period of time, the industry is going to move towards putting everything on the network. SDVoE is the first sort of organized program, I guess I would say, where you can basically buy into a system, an ecosystem, as he termed it, where everyone who's a member is doing transmission and receiving and network topography of AV over IP exactly the same. So technically, if I buy for example, Christy introduced the Terra system here, which is SDVoE, right. And also Aurora Multimedia has SDVoE and DVI Gear has SDVoE. If I use either one of those companies' transmitters or either one of those companies' receivers, they work fine.
Yeah, not only do they work together, but what's important to understand here about this software-defined concept is that while those parts are working together from a transport perspective and the AV signals and the control signals are compatible, SDVoE provides the programming interface that rides over top of this whole thing so that instead of programming your Christie and programming your ZV and programming your DVI gear to work together, you're actually programming the whole thing as a system, even though the different components might come from different suppliers.
Right, so ultimately, when it's all finished, you don't even really know where the on-ramps or off-ramps are coming from because they're all just on the network.
That's it. The topology of these systems is dramatically simpler than what we have today. You know, today you build a system and you've got a matrix switch in the middle and extenders around it, and here's a multi-viewer processor, and here's a video wall controller, and here's a little USB extender. The topology of an SDVoE system is there's an encoder at every source, there's a decoder at every display, and they're all connected to a 10 gig network. That's it. And then you use software to define what do you want. Is this a KVM switch? Is this a multi-viewer? Is this a video wall controller? That's all managed through the API.
And one key thing that he said there is 10 gig over Ethernet. So basically, what you're doing is for a lot of 4K distribution, all 1080p is fine with 10 gig, you got plenty of bandwidth. For a lot of 4K, that means you don't have to compress it. But for some 4K, obviously, when you're doing 4K 60, 444, 12-bit, 16-bit color, you're going to have some compression. Now, so technically, you should understand that you can't send everything completely uncompressed, and it also depends on your network and how much bandwidth you're going to be able to use and that kind of stuff. But also part of your alliance is also Netgear, which is a switch topography manufacturer that makes routers and switches. So you're also aligning with the network companies as well.
Yeah, this comes down to the ecosystem nature of what we're doing, right? I could have started an alliance of encoder and decoder manufacturers only, and I'm sure we'd have some great marketing and maybe some people would buy some stuff, but it's not really serving a function. What we have here is, it's important, it's an ecosystem. We have encoder and decoder manufacturers, we have a switch vendor, we have chip makers, we have infrastructure companies.
A projector company.
And we've got display companies. And we just signed up a new member on the show floor this week, a company called ViewWall, which is interesting because they're a pure software company, right? And because we have this API at the center of our universe, that means a software guy can come in and fully participate. This is an ecosystem about each member contributing their own strengths, right? You're a great display maker, you're a great software maker, you're a great switch maker. We can all work together, and the integrators, the designers can know that even though no one here can truly provide every single piece of a solution, here's a group of companies that together can provide the whole solution and are working together to do that.
Okay, so I'm hopefully going to hit you with my problem with all this historically and see what your reaction is.
Oh, good.
I am not a big fan of HDBaseT because although I think it is a great system and it is a great, it has the potential to be a phenomenal ecosystem because it's easy to adopt. It is a disaster to the industry, in my opinion. It is a disaster. And the reason why it's a disaster is because none of anybody's Gozentas goes to anyone else's Gazatas because the on-ramps and off-ramps, you can build it however you want. So you can have, technically it's 5-play, right? You're supposed to be able to do video, audio, control, Ethernet, and IR all across HDBaseT. But some manufacturer can do just video and IR, and then another manufacturer is doing audio and IR, and you don't even know when you're using one company's transmitter to transmit video if the receiver has video or not in it. So therefore, you can't use disparate manufacturers' products together. Now, I do not blame the manufacturers for any of that. I blame their consortium / alliance / whatever the heck they are, which is actually another question we can get into later. But I think you have the chance to actually usurp them, basically completely displace them. In fact, they came out with their own AV over IP system here at the show that I think is a disaster waiting to happen. Because if they do the same thing they did with their HDBaseT system, nobody's stuff will work together, and you won't know whether or not it's compatible. One nice thing about yours is that at least, even if you don't like video over the network, at least you know the stuff works together.
Well, thanks, that's right. In some fairness to HDBaseT, there's a big challenge when you're putting together an alliance like this. You want to serve the needs of the integrator designer community, but you also need to get members to join up and feel happy. And these members want to feel like they can differentiate and they can compete with one another. And so what I think HDBaseT missed in setting up their alliance is that they've built a transport, but that's all they've built. They said, here's a way to move AV signals from one end of a cable to another, here's a way to move control signals, and then they let people do what they want with that transport. Now, we have a lot of flexibility in our system, but it's all built around a control layer, right? We call it the full stack solution. SDVoE addresses everything from the infrastructure at layer 1 of the network all the way up to our programming interface and applications at layer 7. So that means that how do you do control is prescribed by us. How do you do signal routing and management is prescribed by us, so that interoperability is sort of naturally built in. And now the manufacturers still get to differentiate, both on the hardware side with, hey, you know what, I think I need a product with 4 DisplayPort inputs. I think I need a product that's a display with SDVoE built in. But then they can also differentiate on the software side. And that goes back to, like I said, we now have members that all they do is software. That's the only way they can differentiate. And I think more and more that's the future of this thing. As the topology of the system becomes so much less interesting, right? We're no longer in a hardware-defined world. We're in a software-defined world. And you see this transition across industries. It goes analog, it goes digital, it goes IP, and then it goes to software platforms. And that's where AV can go with SDVoE.
Now, I mean, but you would agree that I know you're defending the HDBaseT a little bit, but you're also seems to be agreeing with me, and that they could have solved the problem by managing their own standard, because they have the standard, but they're not, like they could have. My suggestion in a blog I wrote a couple of years ago, when I warned the industry this was going to be a disaster waiting to happen, and now it's actually happening. You have Panasonic projectors blowing up in the field because you plug in receivers that have power in the wrong location. And you have monitors that just don't work properly because you're hitting the threshold of resolution for that capability, and there's no way to measure it. So you're standing they have the 4K over HDBaseT stuff that basically is using every bit of the bandwidth. So if anything goes wrong at any point at all, the whole thing's going to collapse, and people are constantly complaining about the quality of the system. It's their alliance's fault. They could have had 2-play, 3-play, 4-play, so you'd have some labeling on there, sort of like, network systems. When you go by a router, there's an access point. You get 802.11a, b, c, d, n, and you know the difference between all of them. With HDBaseT, they're using it as one commonality, but in fact there's like 10 different versions of it, and the alliance doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, how they could have labeled it better, and I totally agree with you on that. What I'm saying is that the labeling problem is about something deeper.
That in fact the standard has a problem because they're not as concerned they're more concerned with the transmission methodology than the control methodology.
They're only concerned with the transmission technology, and if you don't address, again, we address all 7 layers of that OSI network model. And that doesn't mean we invented something on every layer, right? Ethernet, TCP, IGMP, like smarter guys than me took care of all that. I just see a good thing, when it's in front of me. But at least we've decided here is how Alliance products are going to work at each layer of the network all the way up to control, so that it's sort of, it's not possible to build products that don't work together. And geez, when you talk about, electrical problems, you plug into a projector and the projector blows up, this is because they're managing the physical layer. They're managing at that lowest level. You know what? I've got Ethernet for that. I've got real power over Ethernet for that.
Why not use standards that already exist rather than inventing your own way of sending power? And that's the problem.
The IEEE decided how we should move power, so let's go with that.
Right, but they've invented their own methodology for it. So I would warn everyone watching this to be really careful in adopting the HDBaseT's version of HDBaseT over IP, which I think they're calling HDBaseT IP, HDBaseT IP. I don't know what they're calling it.
You got the name right.
Yeah.
HDBaseT over IP.
HDBaseT over IP. I would be really careful. I'm going to warn the integrators to stay away from it. I'm going to warn the manufacturers to not adopt it until the alliance, in my opinion, and I hope you agree, until the alliance says we're standardizing everything and we know, and at least there's full disclosure on what works with what. Because that's exactly what you're doing. Because what's going to happen is if they don't do what you're doing, you're going to have unfair competition because they can make claims and you'll have no way to defend them.
Well, and I think, unfortunately for them, and good for me, the cat's out of the bag, right? They've already got people implementing HDBaseT over IP, and they're already starting to do it in their own way, right? Which was exactly the problem the first time. So to rein that back in and say, no, here is how we want to manage and control these, I think is virtually impossible because they've already let it happen again.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, Justin, thanks very much. If you want to learn more about SDVoE, you go to sdvoe.org, sdvoe.org. Even if you're not using it now, at least go to the site and get educated because you have great education on how the whole system works. It has great education on all the different layers, the network layers, and how you're adapting, how your technology goes across, and more importantly, how you're controlling it. For example, Christie's Terra system that came out this week, they have a transmitter, receiver, and they have a separate controller. Why is the separate controller there? When do you need the separate controller? When do you not need the separate controller? If you want to do point-to-point versus putting it on the network, what are the different options there? All of that is available at sdvoe.org. Justin, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Gary.
And thanks for watching.